Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Susan Clark, Vice President for Voter Service for the League of Women Voters, Edina. And I want to welcome you to the Edina Public Schools Bond Forum for 100 million, $24.9 million that will be held on May 5th. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization that encourages citizens to participate in government. While as a league we do studies and take stands on issues, we do not endorse or support political parties or candidates. The views expressed in this forum are those of the representatives of the Edina Public Schools and participants, not those of the League of Women Voters. And the sponsorship of this forum is not an endorsement by the sponsor of any of the positions stated. Showings of this forum will be available tomorrow or possibly the next day, but no later than Wednesday, on Channel 16 until May 5th. The times are Sunday, 10 p.m., Monday, 6 a.m. and 2 p.m., Friday, 10 p.m., and Saturday, 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. It will also be available on the city's website, which is www.edinamn.gov. The speakers for tonight are Superintendent Rick Dressen, Director of Communications and Community Outreach, Susan Broth, and Edina High School Principal, Bruce Lochner. We are asking that you hold your questions until after the presentation. And thank you for attending the forum and to the speakers for presenting. And remember to vote on May 5th. Thanks. You can take it, Rick.
Good evening. I'm Rick Dressen, Superintendent of Schools, and it's my honor to be here. I want to thank the League for their continued sponsorship of events like this and the way they continue to engage community. I mean, Edina, our community was formed on that Grange Hall look where we came together, we talked about challenges and issues and opportunities, and we figured things out. And tonight's that same type of opportunity. We're going to be talking about the district's vision, how it aligns to our mission, and then how, as we look forward, the May 5th building referendum aligns to the strategic work that we're doing. I'm going to ask that Susan Broad begin us with a video that provides a nice overview of the opportunities and the challenges that we face going forward around the district's referendum question.
As we think about changing spaces, one of the commentaries that I often hear about in terms of school buildings is if Rip Van Winkle were to awaken from his nap and return to America, one of the things that he would recognize, and probably the only thing, would be the American school building.
The current model of cells and bells is really about more of a 19th century education model where it's efficient. We have students in classrooms in rows and they're just sitting there sort of intaking information from the teacher.
Having that room look the same as it did when we were in more of a lecture type system, I think kind of lends itself to why we need to move away from that mentality, because how we teach kids just doesn't fit with that anymore.
A lot of these classrooms go back to that cells and bells kind of model. So I think for future and for updating, if we could make spaces more open and more like real life rather than just closed off and compartmentalized.
As we think about spaces of the future, we have to really go back and look at the core educational strategies. And what is it that we really want kids to know and be able to do, and then build our spaces around that.
And we want to kind of give give the building the look to match all of the expectations that are going on right now. I think technology is becoming such an integral part into our day, even at the elementary level.
Students today are really expected to know and to do many, many different things that we growing up didn't have to do or were expected to do. But they're doing it in spaces that were really designed for the 1970s, the 1980s. They're expected to graduate into a world that's very technology oriented, that's very collaborative. And they're learning and doing things in spaces that were not designed to accommodate that kind of learning and that kind of interaction between student to student and teacher to student.
Edina Public Schools need flexible learning spaces. They need places where students can collaborate, working in small groups and large groups. The ability to be able to be free, not be in a desk all day long. We have apps, we have games, we have so many different things that didn't exist in education even 10 years ago. And to think where we'll be in a few years, we need the ability to be flexible.
By renovating and remodeling our schools, it gives us an opportunity to think differently about how we use staff and how each staff has different strengths and how we can best use those strengths. And the current model of just one teacher for 29 kids, I think is somewhat outdated in the sense that we have a lot of excellent teachers that we like to share all of their abilities. And I think that this allows us to think differently about how we use our time, talent, and space that we have at Edina and how we can best serve the kids with all of that time, talent, and space that we have. And then it's just not locked into one teacher with one set of kids and that's it.
We have an opportunity to expand the STEM areas, and when it comes to engineering, we need expanded spaces, and this is an opportunity for Edina schools to become a leader in this area.
I think that it's really just going to allow every student to optimize the resources that are available to them. Whereas now, a lot of the teaching, you have to go at the teacher's pace. In the future, with a lot of these new spaces and just how classrooms are structured, it allows the student to go at their own pace, optimize their learning, which just really allows for a lot better comprehension of the material and, in the end, greater learning and success.
Students just sitting at a desk is great for some situations and for some times, but other times kids, just like adults, we all prefer to work in different places in different ways.
In a more collaborative environment, kids can definitely find other kids to work with and other strengths and not just always feel so, this is who I am as a math student and this is the only time I see these kids. They get to see you all day long and teachers get to see you all day long in different ways too.
As a parent of a kindergartner in the Edina Public Schools, it's exciting to think how my daughter will learn. She will not learn the way that I learned. She will learn in her own way because she's learning skills in which we haven't even know what kind of job she's going to be developed for. So to have the opportunity to think that this referendum and what it could do for our schools is to be able to advance that and advance her learning in a different way in which I've never even been able to teach.
I think that's a great job of framing the opportunity that we have before the question that we're bringing forward as a school district to the community on May 5th. This community has a strong tradition of putting young people, their education, right in front and center, and we've worked hard on that work. We've been driven by a mission statement that has 47 powerful words. This mission statement has been alive officially since the late 80s, but I think it's really been part of our community for a long, long time. It talks about this partnership. It talks about the working together effort that we've been about as a school district. It talks about looking at all learners. It talks about the powerful line at the end, to thrive in a rapidly changing, culturally diverse global society. And as a school district, we've worked hard to do that. We've stretched ourselves often. We've stretched ourselves from a training standpoint to make sure our teachers were being stretched. We've stretched ourselves making sure our students had those opportunities they wanted. We stretched ourselves as a community, reaching and supporting where we could with schools, whether it was volunteering or supporting referendums. We stretched ourselves as a system to make sure that we had that great skill that was all about all of us working for all of our learners. And that's where we are again today. How do all of us help support all learners? And it's built on this thought of that we want to be this premier school district, that we are a premier school district, that we want to continue to be this premier school district, building on what we really do well and saying where do we need to go next. In 2011, we got into a strategic planning process. And the strategic planning process is a great time for a school district to pause and say, where do we want to go next? And 55 community members and a variety of input sessions brought us to this vision statement. And this vision statement said we want to continue to be nationally recognized, but we also want to be internationally recognized because we realize the young people that are living and working in our schools today, that they are going to be looking at not only a national world, but an international world, and the world's going to get small. So we want to continue to have that reach as a school district. And we want to set a place of high expectations for that well-rounded student. And so we formed 3 major focus areas, one around personalized learning. How do we advance that? How do we make sure we reach all students' needs? How do we start listening to students in different ways? How do we find their passion, their spark? How do we make sure we serve them in the best possible way, providing the programs that we want in a personalized way? How do we create a continuum of learning, starting out with that early childhood experience, that birth experience where we have the parenting classes, and how do we continue to grow that through our early elementary years, through our middle years, through our high school years, but then how do we continue to grow as a community in our community education programming? So we've been very purposeful on this continuum of learning and always done it in a partnership. We can't do it alone. The teachers and the students and the parents can't do it alone. It is a call of all of us as a community working together. That's what we've been about, and that's what the strategic plan really brings forward. As we've done this work, we've not only been benchmarking and working closely with school districts in the metro area and in Minnesota and in the upper Midwest, but we also work very closely with 7 other school districts nationally. And these are 7 districts that, again, align well with the work that we do as a school district, but they align well at a national presence. So there's school districts like Palo Alto and like West Side outside of Omaha, like Highland Park, right outside of Dallas. We work with these school districts to make sure that the vision that we're working on, the vision they're working on, is really positioning our students, their students, how we can really advance our work to that highest level. And so the strategic planning process started in 2011. We've done major studies. We started out with a secondary study, taking a look, how do we grow and make sure our secondary program, that middle school and high school program, really is going to be positioned to make sure our kids are successful. So as they launch out of high school, they're ready for that next step they take, whether it's a college, whether it's a career, whatever path they take, that they're ready to launch. Then we stepped back and said, okay, birth through grade 5. What kind of programming do we need to align to that? And we worked hard to define programming on that. And finally, this past year, we've been working on our community education program. How do we help all of us? How do we work together in all the fashions possible to make sure we are a community of learners? And as we looked at this, we started looking at this continuum of services. And we started looking at grade level configurations. We started looking at how we can serve the students. And I'm going to call on Bruce Locklear, a high school principal, to talk a little bit about the grade level configuration, especially at the secondary level, because we recognized the need after a lot of study. I think there's 15 different points of entry where we sought input from community, from staff, from students, to take a look at a different grade level configuration. Thank you for coming tonight, Bruce.
Yeah. My name is Bruce Locklear. I'm a high school principal. I am not a politician. My strengths align with being with kids and teachers every day, and that's where my passion area is. So I'll try to give you what I know tonight, and I'll try to give it to you as best I can. I want to start with a story. I always like stories. I grew up in the South, and we do a lot of life with stories. At 2:50 today, we had a major power outage. And we have a massive building in
This is a true story, by the way.
This is a true story. Yeah. Well, most of them are true.
Yeah, I know.
Most. And Lonnie taught in our building for a few years, and Diane's here tonight, and the lights went out, and we have a basement that gets pitch black, and so I got on the walkie-talkie. I said, all right, security, get out and let's scan the building, make sure everybody's okay and safe. And we did our scan, and we got everybody out, but the security guard came up to me, and he said, you are not going to believe this. He said, I'm walking around, sticking my head in, talking to teachers, telling them, get their kids ready to get them out of the building. He said, this teacher told the kids to get their cell phones out, turn their flashlights on. We're still teaching people. And so that teacher was Diane Daniels, and I hate to call you out, but it was a great story, and I didn't know who it was until Diane shared that with me. But that story to share that we are an exceptional school. And we work so hard to be the best that we can, and We have so many kids and so many teachers that work so hard to help elevate Edina Public Schools and Edina High School to some of the highest performing levels that I have ever seen in education. So excellence is what it is all about. But as we begin this process and dialogue tonight, my question is simple, and I know the answer to the question, so it's somewhat rhetorical, but can we get even better? And it's frightening to think about, but I think we can get even better than we are currently. Rick talked about being benchmarked to all these other schools, and we compare favorably, if not better, than every one of them. And they are the best that the nation has to offer. But it just didn't happen overnight. It happened because of people like you supporting education. It happens every single day because of the teachers that we have working with kids. But it also happens because we have kids who believe deeply in what we do and how we do it. Rick and everybody does a great job talking about how this can work, but I simplify it into 3 things. For me, it boils down to faces, places, and spaces. The faces that I talk about every day are the kids and the teachers. They show up every day and they work as hard as they can. And I also have another story to share briefly on the faces. I try to go in and do some teaching in classrooms, and I was in a language arts classroom. And it ages me a little bit, but it also talks about technology. And so I'm in there and I'm giving them this big spiel about my background and giving them the Native American scope of North Carolina. And they're all sitting in, and they all have their little computers out. And so I gave them this exercise, and this kid raised his hand up in the front of the row, and he said, "Doc Locke," he said, "you're right. That's true." And he said, "Also, did you know?" And 5 other kids, "Did you know? Did you know? Did you know?" And all of a sudden, I went from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. And those are the faces that we're working with. They're brilliant, hardworking young people who have access to a lot of information. The other thing that I have not hidden would be the places. We are looking at redefining Edina High School to a 912 school. But even more important than the 912 Edina High School is making our middle schools truly middle schools. Right now, at best, our middle schools are mini high schools. They're big, and they try to run a middle school program with too many kids. And it doesn't really work. And they work as hard as they can to make it work. But a part of this whole approach to redefining education is to deliver true middle schools. And a true middle school is a teaming middle school. A true middle school is a middle school that's running advisory. A true middle school is a school that is running exploratory programs. And you can only do that in a smaller confine than what we have now. Again, they are many high schools. For the high school, looking at a 912, Edina High School was my first experience into a 1012. And we work hard to make it work. But I think as you look at the standards of the state of Minnesota, those standards are aligned 912. And the beauty of having a high school is it becomes a one-stop shop. You have an entry point, you have an exit point, and everything that child will need in between is right there. And that is so important. The final thing for me is the spaces. And we have all this stuff out there, but for me, at the end of the day, if we are fortunate enough to be able to bring 9th grade to the high school campus, we're going to need somewhere between 20 and 25 classrooms. I'm an operational person. I take all of this and say, how can we make it work? But for me, it's the classrooms and. It's the classrooms and. We have had such a great time as a high school. We're taking a couple of trips, but to see our teachers dream about the potential and the possibility, it is enormous and it's exciting. And that gets back to the simple question, can we be better? And amazingly, yes, we can. I can keep going, so you
no,
tell me.
I think you're good.
All right.
I'm not going to argue.
But for me, it's also an opportunity for us to stop the train. I do a lot of work with students who struggle in the high school academically and personally. And you hear them talk, and they talk about coming in as sophomores. And some of the kids talk about they feel like they're on a fast-moving train, and that train doesn't stop. And it doesn't stop sometimes if you're struggling. It doesn't stop if the transition wasn't good for you. Well, as a community and as a school district, we have an opportunity to stop the train and to ask ourselves, okay, are we doing the best thing for our kids? Our structure, is it aligned in the best possible way to serve our kids? And then finally, and most importantly, how can we keep getting even better? I believe deeply in our school district, so much so I moved here with my family. I have never been in a high school for more than 5 years. I've always had trouble keeping a job. But I love this place, and I love the people, and our kids are phenomenal, and our parents are phenomenal. And so I'm just excited to be here, and I'm excited to help us keep getting better as a district and as a high school. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Bruce, for your sharing. I appreciate it. And Bruce truly is representative of the leaders that we have in the district, and those stories and that perspective are all important because it does tie to the vision. It ties to, again, stopping the train, as Bruce said, and taking a look at how we can use time differently, how can we use our talent differently with training our teachers, how can we use our budget, our return on investment side of making sure our funds are aligned, and then finally space. And I'd like to move into that space, you know, going from the video, stepping back, taking a look at the strategic plan, but let's talk about the space. The space, again, was a recommendation. This whole proposal was built by 24 community members who spent 6 very busy weeks taking a look at all the data, taking a look at our facilities assessment, recognizing we had over $220 million of needs, taking a look at what level of support could we really bring forward to the community for them to consider. And they completed their work from August through October of this past year. In October, we then opened it up to the community and asked more from the community to give us more input and more perspective, we being the school board and the administration. And we listened to those voices and continued to debate and dialogue what we heard in the task force work, very much, again, influencing a final recommendation that finally in January of 2015, the board was ready and made a unanimous vote to call for a referendum on May 5th. We then sent a review and comment document. It's an extensive document to the Department of Education for them to review to see, does this make sense? Does it have value? Is purposeful? We got it right back saying absolutely. And so we really are now on this next stage of sharing the information with our community, talking about it wherever we can. I believe this is our 54th presentation. We've had a variety of other venues. We're trying to get the information out, creating dialogue and opportunities so that we can make sure it's an informed vote when we look on May 5th. When we talk about this vote, we're really looking at 3 areas, and this is very consistent with what we've done as a school district going all the way back. I mean, we were building buildings because we were growing as a school district in the 40s and in the 50s and in the 60s. And the majority of our buildings were built in the 50s and the 60s. And in 1972, we did our last new construction building a high school. But since then, the district's been very purposeful in making sure our facilities are updated on a periodic basis. 1992, we did a major remodel and update on our facilities to make sure that they were aligned to the strategic work we were doing, that we were making sure the teachers had the correct types of spaces available, the students are having the best possible way of learning. In 2003, we came back to the community again and asked for support, and then it was around large group spaces, it was around science labs, it was around FIAD and gymnasium spaces, it was around different types of outdoor spaces as well, and the community was supportive, and we've moved forward with that, and now we come in this decade, in 2015, we're calling for that vote. It's around 3 areas. They've always been around 3 areas. One around security, making sure our buildings are safe and secure. The second is around infrastructure, making sure our buildings, they may be old, but we want them in good condition. If they're in good condition, it's a great place for learning. And finally, it's about the learning, making sure our spaces are aligned so that we have, as Bruce talked about, that and. And so when we take a look at security, we know there are several factors impacting security. It's not about a building. The number one thing is making sure our students and staff know how to respond if there's an emergency that does occur. When there's a power outage, whatever that situation is, that we have our staff and our students know how to respond in an orderly fashion to maintain a safe and secure place. We also know that we have got great friends with the city of Edina, both our fire, our medical, and our police. Very responsive. Less than 5-minute response. Unbelievable. What a great partnership to make sure there's security. But the final piece is our building, and we can do some things in our building to make sure there's a single entrance point, and that as a person enters during that school day, there is an adult who does check them in and make sure that they know where they're going, why they're there, and how we can be of help to them. So that's a big piece of that. The other thing are some other security opportunities that we have available that can, again, enhance the learning that occurs when it's a safe and secure setting. The infrastructure side, our infrastructure this time on this vote will be around our outdoor learning spaces. We're finding that the walls of the classrooms are going beyond even the buildings, that we need to make sure that we have learning spaces for our students and that all students can access those learning spaces, whether they're playgrounds, whatever those spaces are. We want to make sure they're accessible to all students. And so we want to enhance our elementary spaces. We want to see what we can do with our middle school spaces. But we also know that our outdoor fields continue to be stressed. We have so much activity on those fields that we need to continue to expand our turf, our artificial turf. And we've been very successful in the use of our turf from the 2003 referendum. This would give us more turf on both the East Campus and the West Campus. Again, key pieces. The final piece of this infrastructure is taking a look at our bus facilities. Bus facilities has been a very effective tool, but it's also very undersized. It's challenged. We can't even park all our buses on the site. And so we're looking at an alternative bus facility that can really serve us. We also know if we had a little more space, then we wouldn't be contracting some of our services out. It would be a much more effective way to provide services. Plus, we'd have the Edina bus driver driving that bus rather than a contracted service. So again, part of the infrastructure is our transportation facilities. And finally, we're taking a look at all 10 of our programs. Early childhood, 6 elementaries, our 2 middle schools, and our high school. And this is where the majority is. And again, I like that line that Bruce uses. This is the and piece, that we continue to have great spaces for learning. We want to provide that additional learning space, that active learning space. And so we'll start with our early childhood spaces. We'll grow to our elementary, middle, and high school. And when we talk about the spaces, we're talking again about that that direct classroom space is critical, and that does best align with what we're doing. But what other types of spaces are going to be helpful and effective at our elementaries, at our middle school and high school? And it is sometimes where students need to have that individual breakout space, or there are different types of spaces that we need for students to gather in forums, maybe 2 or 3 classes together. Or maybe it's a time where students are grabbing 15, maybe 7, 8 kids in a problem-solving arena, because problem-solving is becoming, that collaborative work with students is becoming more and more important. And maybe it's in a large group setting. Variety of spaces that best meet where the teacher needs to deliver the instruction, where the students need to be. So it's the and beyond the direct instruction. So we're going to continue to have that classroom space available. But what are those additional spaces that are happening right now in schools throughout the United States? Where do we need to go next to align to our strategic plan? And it is sometimes very minor changes, and these aren't things that we've designed right now because we don't do the design work yet. But it's a matter of taking down hallways, possibly opening up spaces. Again, a lot of it's just light remodeling, updating furniture, all things that enhance the and side of effective instruction, and giving students and teachers that option for the best possible learning environments. Early childhood, we're going to continue to grow that program. So we're going to make sure that 3- and 4-year-olds all have access to early childhood. And this is that great partnership we have in our community where the school district will partner with our early childhood providers and continue to provide that service so that our kids are ready for kindergarten. And we see that growing trend of more and more where 3- and 4-year-olds having that opportunity for learning so that they come in and they're ready right on that first day. So we'd be expanding that at our community center to the first floor. The elementary programs, we really have not touched our elementary schools since they were built. And this is that opportunity to make sure the specialized spaces are more appropriate. So a lot of our specialized spaces were add-ons. And we want to say, no, we want to make those more purposeful. And the media centers are continuing to evolve. They're coming different places. You know, when Rick Dressen was going through school, it was called the library. We moved to a media center because that media delivery was where the media, you had to come to the media center to get the distribution, and now that media is right there on that technology device. So it's more of a learning commons where kids come to gather to do the problem solving, and how do we update that space? And so we're looking at different types of spaces at our elementary schools, breakout spaces again for them so they can gather in different class size ranges. The middle schools, again, that opportunity move to a 6-8 middle school, move out of that schools that were designed for the junior high to much more of that family-based, team-based middle school approach. A lot of this would be around remodeling. We'd also be looking at relocating the Southview Middle School main office from the north side to the south side of the building, making that the main entrance. I think that's, again, a security move that's going to be very beneficial and helpful. You see a variety of types of spaces. You hear about fabrication labs and maker spaces. These, again, are just great spaces to do the enhancement of learning. And so we're looking at that for some of our pre-engineering program, and we really think that pre-engineering program is going to continue to expand so that all kids have that opportunity to expand their skills and their talents in the science, math, technology, arts, bringing all those pre-engineering skills together. At the high school, we talked about, and it is someplace between that 25 to 28 classroom spaces. Again, it'll be around, the power of this is moving as this ninth graders come up to the high school. We get to design the school to meet the program. And so often you don't have that opportunity, so you have to fit the program into the school, and this is an opportunity where we really get to step back and do that. And so we're looking at that type of spaces, and we're saying where can we grow those spaces to make sure we have that great welcome for the ninth grade, and we can have that continuum of services that Bruce talked about, 9 through 12. We also know there are some spaces that we need to advance, gymnasium spaces, some of the large group space, gathering spaces for our robotics and for some of the other fabrication work that's continuing to evolve, and how schools and departments are working together in different ways. All that would be included in the high school edition. So when you take a look at the high school and where the major additions are, again, these are all renderings because in the world of public education, you don't do any of the architectural work until the referendum passes because you don't have the funds. And so when you talk to other school districts, you're going to hear the same position where we do renderings, and we do based on real programming. It's based on student count. It's based on current program. It's based on projected programming. So we know the square footage that we need. We just don't have the design work. But this does demonstrate where we could possibly be looking at the additions. You can see the gymnasium space is actually on the north side of the building, actually built into the hill. Here's a north view looking back to the south, a rendering where you can see, and this is not to scale or anything, but just gives the concept. And then here's an overview of the facility, and you can see the orange are the potential, where we have potential additions. That's not to say that's for sure, but those are spaces that we'd be looking at, that we're testing to say those would work. You can see the gymnasium space actually would be a tunnel from the current high school through that underneath the road to that space. You can see where we'd be adding turf fields, additional parking lots. So that, again, those are all possibilities. If the referendum was successful, then we'd get into design work to say, here's how all these puzzle pieces would come together to make sure we really have our spaces aligned to the strategic work we're desiring. When it comes to funding this $124.9 million project, what it does is it's a 21-year bond. That bond is impact on the average home. A $440,000 home is a little over $330 a year. Again, this is a challenge. What we know is when we weigh this out from what was passed in 2003 and you make adjustments for cost of living because of our tax capacity growth and because it's such a prime time for borrowing money right now, this is a very competitive time. And this is one of the reasons the board is interested in this May vote, because it was such a prime time financially for us to get the maximum amount of funds to make the maximum amount of good through the facility process. We've been on this timeline of going out and talking, sharing information, putting things on the website, being at different places, gathering data, getting information out, responding to questions throughout January. March 20th is when when the absentee ballot voting started. Our official vote is May 5th. Again, May 5th was for a couple reasons. The board made that determination. One was around the timing, given financial, but also this was that opportunity for us to do our design work. If the referendum was successful through the summer and the fall of 2015, we would go back out to bid in the winter of 2016, and construction could start right away in 2016. If we delayed that through the summer, we would lose that window of time. But what we know then is the high school would be completing at this time, the tentative time would be that fall of 2017. So the 6th grade students who are currently in our middle schools would be that first 9th grade class entering the 9-12 high school setting. Again, there's a lot of information out there. on the website. Certainly want to respond to questions or emails, so we continually check that. So if you have individual places, this is our last public meeting. We continue to have access points via the web. We can provide information, and there's a lot of video work out there, so I'd encourage people to check in. But if you do want an individual meeting, be it a book club or some type of group setting, again, it's just a matter of calling, and we will come out to make sure we can carry on this conversation. With that, that ends the formal remarks that we have planned for tonight. We do have a team of administrators and consultants here to help respond to questions or comments that you might have so that we can get those questions answered. I want to thank school board members for also being present tonight, so they're here as well. But at this point, we'll open up the floor to questions that we might have, and then we will respond to those questions. So the plan, the question is, we heard the question, I guess we don't have to repeat it, do we? It's got a microphone. We would move the ninth grade in with the high school. So we might make some changes around course delivery a year early, but the real move, the programming would officially begin when the ninth graders moved into the high school. But would that be after That would be in the fall of 2017. So the construction would be done? At the high school would be done, yes.
And so the class of 2017 would have the construction throughout the year?
The construction would be complete through in the fall of 2017. So the high school would be set. The construction year at the high school would be 2016. Yeah, right.
Selfish question.
Oh.
Good question.
I have a question. Are there any representatives here from the teachers union? And the reason I ask that is because this is a considerable amount of money, and when the teachers need a raise and they deserve a raise when it's time for a raise, will there be money? That's my first question. And the second question is, there are, just like with the Capitol building, there are costs that weren't expected, and what'll happen if that happens in this case? If there's, cost overrides, is that how you refer to it?
So I'm going to ask, did I see Von Dirk here from Wold Architect? So Von, we might ask you to grab a microphone. Let me respond to the first question. One is, so this is a capital fund. So the referendum is actually out of the fund called capital. So the operating costs, where salaries and benefits and everything comes out of an operating budget. So these are two separate pots that they can't commingle. So this would not impact class size or salaries. That's really a different pot of money, as it were. And so that's...
Teachers are not worried about this?
No, I mean, so the bottom line is teachers have been involved in our strategic planning from day one. So our teachers have been very engaged. We've had what we call implementation teams, which are made up of teachers who do the study and bring the recommendations forward. We had an implementation team of 6 teachers who did the work last year. This year, right now, our birth through grade 5, we've got 14 teachers who are involved in doing the data gathering, sorting out, helping shape the recommendations. So our teachers are very engaged in the process, and I think there's a lot of possibilities here that they see as a real strong advantage. But I'm going to call on Von Dirks from Wold Architect, who's our lead architect with our project, to talk a little bit about how we respond to the budgeting process as well as if there are overruns.
The question is in terms of the construction costs. So we do this type of work on an annual basis and really look strongly to... Sorry. Turn the mic on.
There we go.
All right.
Von, go ahead.
So the way that we take a look at the construction costs are we're doing this type of work on an annual basis in school districts and other public facilities. And so we keep a very strong database of what bid costs are coming in at, where renovation costs are, so we know accurately what we need to be budgeting. In addition, we've planned in contingency amounts for both what we would call unforeseens, which are whenever you open up a building, especially the size of these buildings, there's going to be things that aren't the way they appear on the plans or aren't the way that you would anticipate them to be, and so we've built in money for that, as well as scope issues. Some of that will cover fluctuations in the bid market. Some of it will cover additional ideas that will come up during the design process. While we're taking a look at this, could we possibly consider some of these other areas? And so we've got a little bit of flexibility to consider those as well. We will very much take all those things into consideration. We want the staff involved as part of that, and that's why design doesn't happen before the referenda in some regards, and that we need to have the staff involved in that collaborative process. So the contingencies that are built in will accommodate those issues.
Thank you, Ann.
I had heard
Yep, you're good.
I had heard a statistic a while ago that only 25% of Edina residents now have school-age children. And I'm just, $125 million is a lot of money, and I think the plan is very thoughtful. What are the enrollment projections over, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Very good.
And how does that factor in the planning?
So this whole strategic process has been a very phased process. We have our projections that we can project 5 years out, and those are the most accurate because we now have the children born, but we've also do 10 and 15-year demographic studies. The demographic study shows that we're going to see about a 1% to a 0.5% increase in our overall enrollment. And you're correct, about 25% of the households in Edina have children in school. What we know is we have about 8,400 students who live in the city, or in the Edina public school system, and about 15 to 16% of those people choose other schools other than Edina public schools, so non-public schools, homeschool, other school districts, other school settings. Through the open enrollment process, by state law, then we bring in about 14%. But we project that 8,500 is probably going to be about the maximum number. So if we would see that increase in resident enrollment, we'd likely just lower the allowed in through the non-resident or the open enrollment process. So we see that balancing number right around 8,400 to 8,500 over the next years, even with the expansion we're seeing around apartment complexes and some of those changes.
Has that percentage of school-age children versus not impacted, or do you have any sense of how the community's reacting to this?
No,
find out on May 5th.
Yeah, we'll find out May 5th. It's been a pretty consistent number between 24 and 27%, and it's always tough to get exact because there's always movement going on. And that's pretty typical of what we see at a metro level as well. So, you know, we see that, and the reality is this community is pretty connected to our schools, so we'll see how connected and how that all impacts going forward.
You're talking about a big change in both learning and the way things are conveyed, as well as the space that it is conveyed in, and how supportive is and qualified are the teaching staff that have to deliver this, as well as the thought that has gone into the restructuring and the use of the spaces, since this is a major part of the expansion cost.
That's correct. So part of the strategic plan is also a 3-year staff training program, staff development program, a professional learning program. And it's not only for the teachers, I mean, it's for all of us, for administrators across the board. We're seeing significant change. So we have a 3-year plan that we're going to roll out. It actually starts this summer, called the Edina Learning Institute. It's our 2nd year. But again, it's very, very purposeful to make sure that we have teachers and staff, support staff, principals, in the buildings that know how to use the space, know that they're equipped to do the training. I mean, it is a challenging time, and we're in a change time. Of Bruce talking about the guide on the side of supporting the learning going on. And we know about 40% of the jobs by the year 2040, which where a lot of our kids will be in prime time, haven't been invented yet. We know that the kids who are in our schools today are going to live in the 21st century and the 22nd century. And so we really need to be shaped around that. Our teachers are going to be working very closely with the architects, going out to make sure the spaces are aligned to our programming. Bruce is taking a team actually on Wednesday, the high school team, out to start taking a look at some of the newer spaces that are out there and how schools are using them in the East Carver School District, and the Prior Lake Savage School District, and the Alexandria Area School District. Again, to make sure that what we design aligns to our program and is really effectively used, so it isn't built and then we have to figure it out. We're actually building to the program.
Can I just add something to that? I think that if anyone has set foot in the classrooms in the last 5 years or so, they would understand that actually today teachers are teaching a lot of what Rick is talking about. And I have to commend anyone that is teaching in our schools these days, because they are retrofitting 1970s classrooms to teach in an environment that is absolutely not appropriate for the style that they are teaching. And our teachers have done, and our administration has done an absolutely outstanding job of teaching these students that are using technology that was not built for these buildings, workout groups, and all the different diversity of students that are now put in these classrooms. And if anyone is unsure about what is going on in the schools these days, I would recommend, or is adamant against this referendum, I would recommend that you actually set foot in the schools and take a tour, because when you walk around and you see children laying on the floor in the hallways so they can have a breakout group, or you see people like my son doing occupational therapy out in the hallway so he can have a breakout session, you will really get an understanding of the challenges that our school is facing. And we talk about transforming spaces, and we're actually have transformed a lot of the education already. And I think that's why our teachers are all for it, because they work so hard every day to make their rooms fit where their minds are and where the kids' minds are already. And we just desperately need the spaces and the tables and the furniture for where we already are and where we're going. And I just need people to really understand that we're already there, and we can be so much further as a community if we support this. And as in respect to the money for the taxes, if people would understand that our educational system brings us so much from a value for your home, that I'm not a financial person by any means, as my husband, but if we do not keep the top tier schools that we have for the next 10, 15, 20 years, it doesn't matter if you're paying $300 a year in taxes every year, because your value of your house is going to go down if we keep our schools the way they are, because we will not be at the top tier, I can absolutely guarantee you, because some of our schools, the inside of them are embarrassing right now. Thank you.
Hi, excuse me, I have one clarification and one question. So the clarification is, did I understand correctly that the $125 million will not reduce class sizes? Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the question is, you showed the renderings that appeared to increase the capital footprint, and you talked about that there's no commingling of the capital and operating budgets. But if the capital footprint is going up, I presume that the operating budgets will have to go up to sustain that, and how is that being financed?
Yep, and I think I'll ask our business director, Margot Bach, to respond to that, if we can get a microphone to her.
Good evening. We have done estimates. Certainly when you increase square footage, you're going to increase utilities and cleaning costs and the like for the costs, and we will absorb that within our own budget. They're also with moving the 9th grade to the high school. The high school has a different schedule, and there are efficiencies between the middle school and high school schedule, so we'll be able to use some of that savings in order to help with the increased square footage.
The question is about possibility of renewable energy, and I'd ask Von Dirks to respond to that. I'm going to kind of play quarterback here and just keep handing the ball off.
Absolutely, yeah. We want to take a look at all renewable energy sources as part of the design, as being good stewards of design, and so we're going to take a look at what's available to us, what the payback is, and how it lowers the operational efficiency of the buildings on a regular basis. We've studied a number of different sources for other districts that we've worked in, and so if something makes sense, we absolutely want to pursue it, and we want to look to see if it has a 5 to 10 year payback as sort of our rule of thumb.
But we'll also use the opportunity for some learning. I mean, it'll be a complement to a lot of our learning.
That is another factor. Some of the items that maybe they don't have the operational efficiency payback in terms of that rule of thumb, but they are good teaching tools. And so solar is a great example of that. It doesn't necessarily generate the amount of savings that we'd like to see on an annual basis, but it could definitely tie into STEM programming and other areas for the curriculum. So we can look for ways to integrate that as well.
Thank you.
I had a question about the allocations of the 125 million. You have these 3 different buckets, and I haven't been in to see the detail behind those 3 different buckets. But the way the referendum is going to be put together, are you looking for us to approve certain amounts in certain buckets, or just one big pot and you do whatever you want with it? But these are your guidelines today. And what sort of control is there about where the money ultimately goes?
Yep, so I mean, we have a review and comment commitment that we submitted to the board for support, so it does define where those dollars go. I know, Vaughn, if you want to go deeper into the breakout of how you come up with those numbers, but it is committed to those areas, the dollar amounts, but I'd defer again to Vaughn to help us define that a little bit further and clarify it.
So the way the budgets are established are a number of different ways. Some of it is cost per square foot. Some of it is based on other work that we're currently working on in the district in terms of the renovation of infrastructure. The review and comment does define the scope around each of the buildings in terms of what we're looking at in both educational spaces as well as some of those more physical concerns. And so we do apply that scope of work to each building. The budgets may shift slightly as bids come in and we take a look at what dollars are available and where the overall project is, but we are bound to implementing the work that's in that review and comment across the district.
It's a single question, that's correct.
I have a question. In some of the slides, it refers to specialized learner spaces. And is that just wording? What does that mean? Is that special ed?
It's special education. It's the unique learner programs. It might be for gifted and talented. It might be for some of the breakout spaces and some of the other unique programming spaces that are programs that we offer. But one of the major areas really is making sure that our some of the special education spaces are appropriate for the learners, because those oftentimes were add-ons, and we really want to make sure that it's all aligned.
And what is the proportion of special ed in terms of actual student numbers or dollars spent?
Pardon? Yeah, so our specialized services are around 10 to 11% of the student population.
Special education. Does that include the gifted?
No, I thought CS of that's for special education services.
And that just qualifies for the special education services. That's not other specialized learner programs. And then I would also add that some of the specialized learner programs could be a curricular specific space. Like maybe, it's hard to do Phi-Ed in a classroom. So that might be something like that, maybe a fitness wellness space that might be needed.
But it should be noted that we have had the opportunity to spend a lot of time talking to teachers and to students around what should this space look like. It's nothing that we're pulling randomly out of the sky. For example, our language arts department spent a lot of time talking about the need to have classroom spaces, but also large group learner spaces where they could have large groups come in, work on a singular lesson, then have breakout spaces around that. So we're being very mindful, listening to our professional staff around what their needs are, also talk to our students. We went through a major renovation in our commons area. It is one of the most widely used areas in our building, but we flipped what was a very open, dead space to a very vibrant, lively space. We've also
been doing much of that same renovation to our media center. But we're trying to listen and take copious notes on what people need as we move through this process. It's something that we're listening to the professionals about what they need, listening to some of the experts. We're visiting schools. We're at the University of Minnesota looking at their biology learning labs. We're going up to Alec and Prior Lake. We're trying to get as much information as we can to make certain that we do this as best we can, because we typically have one shot at this. That's a great question.
I saw something in some of the materials about an activity center that was in, so could you explain what that is?
So early on there was discussion about an activity center. Should we have something that would be with a track and like a field house approach? That was studied by the task force, and in the end decided that we did not need the number of gymnasium spaces. So we do need gymnasium space, and we need some large group spaces. But that activity center really did not launch, and we narrowed reduced those spaces in those final phases before it came to a board for recommendation.
The drawings that you gave seem to telegraph that maybe there's going to be a disproportionate amount of this money going into athletic fields, facilities, and so forth. Disproportionate, I don't know what that would mean. Are you telegraphing the fact that maybe the old high school and that rather underused building and the athletic fields here may be retired soon?
So you're talking about the original high school?
Right.
No, we are, I mean, it's the whole first floor is going to be repurposed for early childhood. We'll see the third floor continue to have a variety of services. Some of the services that we had on first floor and second floor will likely move up to the third floor. So I think that space is going to continue to be repurposed. It's a great repurposed space because there's still quality building and with a lot of quality space. And so we don't see that change happening at all.
And the second floor is Normandale French immersion elementary school.
That's right. And the second floor of that is currently an elementary. The Normandale Elementary building, and it will remain an elementary building. That's a good point as well. Yeah, I will. So one of the other things that was not mentioned, I failed to mention in the presentation is while we're looking at the gymnasium space at the high school, that will allow us to make sure we have a 9-12 high school setting after school as well. And one of the challenges has been is that we've currently, as soon as the day is over for our high school, that often then ends up going and taking on some of the middle school gymnasium spaces and large group spaces, and that really limits our after school opportunities for our middle schoolers. And when we get to that 6-8 middle school, we really do want to have after-school programming for them as well. And now with the 9-12 being at the high school and the facilities there, we'll have availability both at Valley View and Southview for after-school activities. And some of the best learning and socializing that occurs is structured after hours. And so that's one of the things we really want to be able to grow with our new middle school program.
And I would just add your question about the fields. There's still a plan that Coleman Stadium would be the primary stadium for that. There's no plan to get rid of that. But the additional field space that we're talking about over at the current high school, which is our west campus, is that what there's currently grass fields that are basically dirt fields. That's what we're talking about, is just repairing those a little bit so that the practices and the other activities that happen on them are safer.
You kind of touched on the Normandale French immersion. What's going to happen when the 9th graders then move over to the high school? Do they still get some French immersion? And I've also heard rumors that maybe they'd be moving to Southview, so I'm just wondering what your plans are.
From a programming standpoint, that's one of the things we're moving into right now. So we actually started just, again, rethinking what's 9-12, what the program, what are the course offerings, what opportunities are going to be in 9-12, and redesigning the middle school 6 through 8. No decisions have been made. We're committed to continue to be committed to that French immersion experience, and so we'll continue to have that. As far as location of the program, that determination hasn't been made either. We really want to get into what the program's going to look like before we make a decision on that. And those decisions are slated for second semester 2015-16. So we'll have that sorted out by second semester next year.
So the kids could be over at Valley View and then have to move over to the other school, to Southview, halfway
well,
through?
no, there would be a transition process, so we would make it a smooth transition.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. So we are going to do some planning around all this when the transition occurs. We're going to have this phased-in approach on several of our programs, even course offerings and graduation requirements. All those things will be staged in.
Okay. And then one other question, which Bruce, the principal, mentioned. You're saying the middle schools are mini high schools, and I'm not quite... My son's in 8th grade, and I don't know, he never complains. So
Yeah,
I'm trying to
right.
figure out what is the issue, because testing, obviously, our children do really, really well.
Yeah.
So we aren't falling behind in Minnesota as far as being a great school. So what are we missing?
I think the
in
size, first and foremost, is something that really prohibits a middle school model. I think when you look at the true middle school model, it gets around the whole idea of teaming, the idea of integration, the idea of making opportunities for exploration. And in working with our middle school principals, they say they have such a limited amount of that because of the sheer size of it. And so I think by making it smaller, you'll create more opportunities. Good question.
I don't need a microphone. I think I can shout, but oh, okay. I just, I'm all in favor of a strong educational base, and, to your point, I ache for the teachers that need the space and need the upgrading, but I guess my question is, when I look at, and there's probably a really good explanation for this, but these needs that need to be met, was this taken into consideration? I look at the facilities at Southview, I look at the pool, the state-of-the-art pool, and the state-of-the-art theater, and I think that money could have gone a long way towards enhancing the classrooms. And I just really have a hard time with now, okay, all that money went into Southview for those things that to me didn't really enhance learning, and now the classrooms are suffering and the teachers are suffering. So can you just explain what went into that process?
Yep, so I'm confident there was a similar process of vetting and sorting out priorities, and we didn't have those large group spaces, and we didn't have a pool that was meeting our needs, and we didn't have the science spaces that we needed at the high school, and we didn't have some of the gymnasium spaces that were needed at our schools, at Southview, for example, and we really needed to make some improvements at Normandale Elementary as well. So it became this prioritized system, and those are all locked in. I mean, we have the good fortune of saying we have large group space at our high school with the new EPAC center that gets high use with FIC auditorium. That allows us to make, so that we can stay within the limits of really focusing on gymnasium space and classroom space, because we're complementing what was successful in 2003. So really I see this being a complement to the work that was done in the referendum back in 2003.
Thank you so much, and thanks for putting on this forum. It's been great. I've been at a few of these, and I'm a new resident to Edina. I took a couple notes because the last time I spoke, I kind of got my thoughts in my head a little jumbled, so I thought I'd be a little more thoughtful this time. I relocated here to Edina in 2012. My family, my wife and daughter, who's now 7, relocated here, and we moved here to Edina specifically because of the schools. It wasn't the housing stock, it wasn't the roads, it was the schools. And I'm in East Edina, which someone told me once was poor Edina, which I haven't ever found, but we're over in that area. But we did, and I relocated here with Target in 2012 and was the lead construction executive for about 3/4 of the U.S. We truly fell in love with the schools, and we have stayed because of the schools. Just about 5 weeks ago, I was laid off from that executive job at Target, along with 1,699 of my fellow Target colleagues. And we've decided to stay. We had a very serious discussion with my wife and my daughter that day, that weekend. And we're from Chicago. My wife is from Chicago, and she longs to be back in Chicago where she grew up. But we made the decision to stay. And in fact, we're doing some renovations to our house this week because we intend to stay and to live here for a long time. We evaluated Catholic schools. we evaluated private schools with our kindergarten teacher and now our first grade teacher, Kim Mismash and Tom Mealy. We have absolutely fallen in love with our teachers and with the teachers that are here in these schools. And you can well imagine that we're very firmly in favor of this referendum. In fact, so much so my daughter and I were the very first voters on the very first day of absentee voting. We went at 8 a.m. and surprised the woman who was opening up the ballot that she's here, as it turns out. She may remember my daughter and I, but my daughter filled out the little bubble. And then I've heard some complaints in various meetings about the security costs and the $8 million. You may guess from my haircut or the shoulder boards here that I have on my jacket that I'm retired military, and I was in the service for 25 years. It's rare that I walk into a building where I don't think about security. It doesn't matter whether it's a grocery store or it's a school. I retired as a Master Chief Petty Officer. I was all about taking care of troops, soldiers, every service around the world, NATO, 4 deployments under my belt. My wife has been with me for 2. She claims all 4 as her own, as she should. It's a very much changing security environment in the world, though, and the thing that I would stress is in 1991, at my first deployment to the Middle East, the first of 2 to the Middle East, the base where I was trained was a place called Fort Dix, New Jersey. Fort Dix, New Jersey, anybody could drive onto the post. There was no fence. There was no locks. There was no guard station. You couldn't imagine in today's security environment that being the case. Every base, every Army base has been locked down with guard posts and fences. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that none of those Army posts, save one 2 weeks ago, has been attacked anywhere in the United States. But I don't think any of us would agree that not having the proper security on those posts, taking care of our troops, is the right thing. And I would further say that taking care of our kids and the security of our kids and families is a very important thing as well. And I just wanted to specifically call out that I think this is a very worthwhile investment to make sure that our schools are secure. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple more questions and then we'll.
I'd like to just get a clarification on, you referred to the middle schools are like high schools and that they're too big and this will make them smaller. And I guess I'm a little confused because if the 9th graders are essentially, I mean, if middle schools are going from being 7 to 9 to being 6 to 8, is that not the case? Okay. So the idea is that you're reducing the total number
Right.
there?
We're going to get to
okay.
a 3 grade level middle school.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
What happens to the space? You've got its room there presumably for 4 grades now. You're losing a grade, so you're putting, it's 3/4 of the student population going forward. Will you exchange this space to accommodate or just give them more room to rattle around?
Yeah, so I mean, if you are in our middle schools are at that maximum beyond capacity. Some of the spaces aren't available. We've got classes that are scheduled for storage areas that we're making the best we can, but we want to really make them more purposeful. And so it will be repurposing of space, giving a little more, and we do want to create a little more of room for students. And again, when we start looking at some of these other gathering spaces, that would be one of the things that we want to put to an and to the classroom.
I had a question on the bus center, the transportation area. Right now, that's not far from here, right down next to the Grandview space. Have you worked with the city with what they're doing with Grandview and figuring out what you could do and how you can work together on this to make it work best for everybody?
Yep, so we're working hard. We have a variety of partnerships that we do work informally and formally on with the city. We've had some joint ventures that have been very successful with the transportation building. We are looking at the possibility where we could partner and what things we could have in common, be it fueling stations or wash bays or things of that sort. So we are looking at where we can be in common with the city. So there is ongoing conversations. In fact, there were city council and school board members met with Scott Neal and myself last August to kind of frame up what are some parameters we need to be considering as we go forward. So that ongoing discussion is out there.
Is there a less expensive plan B or C if this referendum fails?
So the question is, This was a recommendation brought by the task force to the board. The board vetted it. The board feels like this is the plan. It's the most effective plan that benefits our student learners, that maximizes the funding available, that has the least amount of impact on the community and still meets that strategic future, that mission. So if it was not successful, what the board would likely do would step back. We would assess, get feedback, take a look, and then we'd plan forward what the next step might be. But there really isn't a plan B because this is the plan at this point.
My question is about teachers' office spaces, and will this alleviate teachers on carts? I don't know how to better phrase that. I know that teachers are pretty concerned about having their own space, their privacy to make calls to parents, whatever that may be, and that's kind of lacking right now.
Yeah, we are using every space. I think I'm going to ask Vaughn just to talk about some of the design work that's occurring in schools that we'll be considering. But we'll make sure the teachers are very close to all this work so that their needs are being met.
So one of the concepts obviously is the teacher on a cart, and usually that comes from a capacity issue. You can go to a higher capacity if you can schedule out all the rooms in the building 100% of the time. That's usually a last resort. What we're really looking at here is something that's a blend between the traditional classrooms that you have in the district and something that aligns with more of the college model, where instructors move to the types of spaces that are appropriate for education. They may have office space elsewhere to do that. Some teachers will still have room spaces that are their own. But the idea wouldn't be to work within a cart. It would be to work collaboratively with the instructors that you're going to team teach with, do interdisciplinary work with, so that you're going to have a blend of different types of spaces. So the goal is not to inconvenience staff, but to provide something that provides that and that Bruce was talking about earlier.
What goes on the cart? I mean, it is going to be, Vaughn, go ahead and talk about how we. Yeah, there you go.
Elementary Spanish used to be on a cart.
That's correct.
If you have to move from hour to hour, there's certain instructional materials that you want to take with you, things that normally you would have at a desk at the front of the room, but that supports that lecture-based only model where this is my space, this is what I'm instructing on, and I have everything I need at my fingertips. With more digital, obviously, the cart gets a lot smaller, a theoretical cart as opposed to that. Exactly. You can plug into your resources and pull them up through technology in whatever space you're in.
Ironically, the story opened with about the teacher with the flashlight. She went out and bought this cart, and I think when she retires, you're giving that to me, I hope? Okay.
It's hers now.
But she has books in that thing. I mean, teaching is a very personal job. And so there's a certain element of you that you try to take with you wherever you go in that process. So this morning she was subbing for a teacher and she had 30 atlases in that. I don't know what all you had in that thing this morning, but it was full and it's on wheels and it's big. And so it's, there needs to be something. The space constraints right now are such that we're being squeezed out of classrooms and teachers having that space, so we really need to evaluate how we can make that work more effectively, because what we're doing now is not very optimal nor efficient or healthy for our teachers.
Good evening. My name is Winnie Martin. I have 2 kids in elementary school, and I think Superintendent Dressen has actually sold himself short a little bit tonight. You've had a couple of questions on activity center spaces, and then Gal had a question on the pool and the theater. And I've heard you talk a lot about learning all the time, all day learning, not necessarily in the classroom. And I think one of the great things we have here in Edina, at our schools, at our parks, at so many facilities we have, is that kids are given the opportunity to learn not just in the classroom, but at the other places too. And when they're able to take what they learn in that classroom and take it to a robotics lab or a science lab, or have a science fair day in a room that can actually fit every student, that's where I think they truly learn. And from my perspective, and where I went to school in Georgia, so a few Southerners in here, I wish we had more space so they could truly take what they learn in the classroom and learn it that much further. So again, I've heard a couple of times people kind of question about, the numbers look a little odd or off about what is that space for? And, I know amongst a lot of the parents that are of my generation with kids smaller, we look and say, boy, wouldn't that be great if our kids had the space to have a full science lab or a science fair or a full robotics symposium or have, not just a District 273 debate center, but, have kids from all over the state of Minnesota. And I think your activity center, it's not just a gym or 2 gyms or 3 gyms. It's a huge multi-purpose space that could open up so many things for not just our kids, but for the community. And I want people to think about that and think about, again, how much our families and our kids get, not only from our schools, but outside the schools. And I think that would be a nice plus and positive to think about those spaces and how we could use it more.
Great. Well, I thank you. Thank you, and thank everybody for coming tonight. It's been a great conversation. Again, we will certainly be around to answer other questions. I thank the League again for sponsoring tonight. I encourage everybody to make sure May 5th is on your calendar. Again, you can come in early to vote, and May 5th is a date that Edina Public Schools will be community members will be casting ballots, and I hope you make sure you do that. Thanks again for the evening, and I wish you a very, very wonderful spring. Thank you, everybody.
This has to do with the community center. How much of this is